Ultimately, however, her own words placed her at the restaurant. On July 6, 2001, she told the informants, "I did have something to do with it. I can't tell my mother I had something to do with it. She's got a bad heart. But I could tell my dad." She also said, "I didn't kill them. I put that on everything I love. I didn't kill them." Parts of her testimony weren't consistent with testimony from other witnesses. On the surveillance video, she said she saw Troy Snell running out the back door, but the restaurant manager said that would not have been possible. After 5 p.m., that door has no access. The door had a magnetic lock controlled by an alarm company. She also said Palmer's shirt was covered in blood, but the TBI forensic experts testified there wouldn't have been large amounts of blood anywhere except under the victims' bodies. Taylor told the informants that she was haunted by Palmer's actions. She stated, "That's something that rides on your conscience. You can't never forget about it. I don't even want to think about it. I can't stand to be around him to this day. He shouldn't have done what he did." Taylor said she didn't know how much money was taken from the restaurant or how much he gave her. "Of course, he gave me cheese," her word for money, but she said she didn't even want it. Forensic scientists from the TBI testified for several hours about their work at the crime scene, describing the locations of the bodies and how each of the victims died from gunshot wounds to the head. They also detailed how they spent more than 12 hours scouring the area and Troy Snell's car, obtaining footprints, cigarette butts, and fingerprints, none of which, they admitted, could be directly connected to LaTonya Taylor or Percy Palmer. The fourth day of the testimony brought out a last-ditch effort by the defense to place blame elsewhere, and it was definitely the strangest moments of the trial. A woman named Sally Paget was put on the stand and testified that Darrell Wayne Lambert, who she said she was having a secret affair with, was the real killer. Paget testified that Lambert told her he and another man planned to take Troy Snell as a hostage at the restaurant. He didn't mention whether LaTonya was present during the crime. He allegedly said that he, Snell, and Brian Spate smoked pot while Scott Myers was held in the cooler. Paget went on to say that Myers wanted to fight, and Lambert struck him with the butt of his gun and then tied him up. In addition, Brian Spate allegedly told Lambert and the other man to take the money before Spate's own life was taken. Lambert then allegedly shot Snell point blank while they were sitting in his car. Lambert allegedly told Paget this tale in 2001 when he was her supplier for cocaine. Now here's the kicker. Sally Paget was on probation for facilitating a robbery. She admitted to having multiple personalities and was supposedly taking 15 antipsychotic medications. Under cross-examination, the district attorney asked which personality was on the witness stand. She replied, "Whichever one is calm enough to sit here." She also said, "I have no idea what I did yesterday." When it came Lambert's turn to testify, he told a different tale. He said that not only did he not murder anyone at the restaurant, he didn't even know Sally Paget. He did admit to knowing Troy Snell, but said the last time he saw him, the two were in grammar school. The grisliest part of the trial followed. The state medical examiner, Dr. Bruce Levy, took the stand. He stated that he performed the autopsies on all of the victims. The cause of death for each was a gunshot wound to the head, and that the manner of death was homicide. Levy said that Troy Snell was shot at a distance of 6 inches in the right temple by someone sitting in the back of his car. Brian Spate was shot at a distance of 2 feet. Scott Myers was bound with an electrical cord under his armpits and then around his clasped hands. Myers was shot in the back of the head near the base of his skull, and the bullet struck his spinal cord. He died almost instantly. Following the testimony of Dr. Levy, the prosecution rested its case. On Friday, in rebuttal to defense witness Sally Paget, the district attorney provided tests that showed neither Spate nor Snell had any drugs in their systems at the time of death. He also put Detective Rick Hall back on the stand to address discrepancies between what Paget said on the stand and what she said in her interview with him. Defense attorney Herschel Koger cross-examined Hall about a blue backpack or duffel bag allegedly carried by Taylor that was found in the hotel room at the time of her arrest. Hall said he did not send any of the items to the TBI, but did not elaborate as to why not. LaTonya Taylor took the stand outside the presence of the jury and said she did not wish to testify on her own behalf. Following her brief stay on the stand, the defense rested. Closing arguments for the prosecution were simple and to the point. Assistant District Attorney Tom Jackson performed brilliantly for the state. He reviewed the evidence linking Taylor to the crime, specifically the video and audio tapes made at the hotels. He said the crime was about Taylor getting her cheese, her word for cash. Taylor got her cheese, Jackson said, and we got 3 dead people. Herschel Koger handled the closing for the defense. The prosecution, he said, wanted the jurors to make a leap about the evidence. For example, one witness who saw Taylor inside the restaurant described her as a medium-sized woman, while Koger described her as larger. He said this was an alibi case, as several witnesses had placed Taylor at the Imperial Gardens apartments at the time of the murders. Koger said Taylor wasn't even at the Captain D's. He said jurors had to be sure they were convicting the right person. At 5:30 on Friday, the 5th day of the trial, jurors began deliberations. The jury of 5 men and 7 women deliberated for 5 hours before calling it a night. Saturday, September 25, 2004, more than 50 months after the murders, was the day families had been praying for. The jury deliberated for 4 more hours before the judge was notified that a verdict had been reached. LaTonya Taylor stood with her lawyers and appeared emotionless as Judge Don Ash read the verdict. Taylor was found guilty on 9 of the 10 charges she faced. She was found guilty of felony murder in the deaths of Snell, Myers, and Spate, as well as 3 counts of aggravated robbery. She was also found guilty of the aggravated kidnapping of Myers and Spate, but was found not guilty in the kidnapping of Troy Snell. As the verdict was being read, the mothers of the 3 murdered men held hands and cried, while the parents of LaTonya Taylor appeared stunned and hung their heads. After the verdict was completed, Taylor simply held out her hands, was handcuffed, and led peacefully from the courtroom. On Monday, Taylor was back in court for the sentencing phase of her trial. The prosecution wanted the death penalty and listed all the reasons why, and presented several aggravating factors, such as the fact that 3 people were killed at once and that Taylor had previously been convicted of a robbery. Taylor's attorneys had to go the other way, presenting mitigating factors such as Taylor's mental capacity and the fact that it could not be proven who actually pulled the trigger in hopes of avoiding the death penalty. Taylor once again declined to testify in her own behalf, and she didn't bat an eye when the judge committed her into the custody of the state for the rest of her natural life without the possibility of parole. In December, she went before Judge Ash again. She was given an additional 20 years for the aggravated robbery and aggravated kidnapping charges. She had also been sentenced to 23 years for the Arbry's robbery in Davidson County. If you're keeping track, that's life plus 43 years. Taylor's attorneys filed a motion for a new trial within days of the guilty verdict. They said that the proof was insufficient to support a guilty verdict and that the prosecution had failed to prove the crime had happened in Rutherford County. Prosecutors responded that the proof was indeed sufficient to support the verdict and that the defendants freely admitted that the crime happened in Rutherford County. In January of 2005, that motion was denied. Of course, you can't have a sentence without an appeal. Taylor filed an appeal in 2006, appealing her convictions by challenging the sufficiency of the evidence to support the convictions. When the sufficiency of the evidence is challenged upon appeal, the relative question to the reviewing court is whether, after viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the prosecution, any rational trier of fact could have found the essential elements of the offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. In order to prove Taylor's guilt in the murders, the state relied on the theory of criminal responsibility. Under Tennessee law, a person may be charged with an offense if he or she is criminally responsible for the perpetration of the offense. The appeals court said that while the proof in the case was largely circumstantial, when taken in totality, pointed unerringly to the defendant's guilt. Taylor's attorneys also said that the testimony of her cousin, Melanie Taylor, should have been excluded along with the surveillance video and audio from the hotels. They also said that the trial court erred in not finding Taylor mentally retarded. The appeals court concluded that the evidence was sufficient to support the judgments of conviction and that the testimonies of Melanie Taylor and the audio and videotapes were properly admitted. They declined to review the mental retardation issues. In 2009, she filed another appeal, this time claiming ineffective counsel. She contended that she was eligible for post-conviction relief because her attorneys failed to call a potential alibi witness, failed to effectively communicate with her, and failed to timely notify her of the Supreme Court's denial of her Rule 11 application for relief. In order to obtain post-conviction relief, a petitioner must show that the conviction is void or voidable because of the abridgment of a constitutional right. While the court did find that counsel waited an unreasonable amount of time before notifying her of the disposition of her application to appeal the court's prior opinion affirming her convictions, it did not show that the counsel's delay prejudiced her in any way. The court ultimately found that Taylor did receive the effective assistance of counsel. Her appeal was denied. Taylor is now inmate number 00381-637 in the Tennessee prison system, and she will reside at the Tennessee Prison for Women until she draws her last breath. From the time of her arrest until the time of this broadcast, she will have been in jail or prison for the last 18 years. She was born in 1977. She would be 42 years old on July 13th of 2019. It is entirely possible she could be in prison for another 40 years or so. While many were disappointed that the death penalty was not imposed, one columnist in the Daily News Journal pointed out that Bebe is now living in her own little hell on earth, knowing that she caused the murders of 3 innocent individuals, and she must live with that fact for whatever life she had left. Detective Rick Hall had an insight into her life behind bars. After Bebe was safely locked away, attention was turned to Percy Palmer and his upcoming trial. Thankfully, on January 26, 2005, the public was spared the expense of another trial when Palmer took a plea agreement with prosecutors. Before accepting the deal arranged by prosecutors and Palmer's court-appointed attorneys, Judge Don Ash conversed with Troy Snell's mother, who was wearing her son's class ring. She indicated that she was satisfied before he proceeded.